Hi guys, welcome to the lymphatic system. So in this little introductory video lesson here, I'm just going to do a general introduction to the lymphatic system itself and then talk a little bit about the different types of immunity. And then the rest of the lectures are going to focus more on the more complex topics within the lymphatic system. I'm not going to do any lectures on the anatomy of the organs and lymphatics and stuff. I think you guys can pretty much handle that. Send questions if you are unsure about that piece. You have the lab manual and the textbook to help you with that. I want to spend some time making these lectures on the more complex parts of the immune response. So I'm going to do a general introduction here with this lesson, and then you'll see the other lessons posted particularly for the different topics. And so it's easier to do these small little mini lessons than to do a big hour and a half long lecture all in one sitting. It's a little bit more, it's harder to do that way. So these little ones, if I make a mistake, I only have to re-record 15 minutes or 5 minutes instead of 45 minutes. So that's kind of the motivation behind that. And I'm anticipating this is how I'll do for the rest of the term, but things may change and I could always, I'm pretty flexible. I'm going to be about 2 weeks ahead, so I can always change things if they're not working. So send me emails, give me feedback, tell me what's working and what's not working. So first of all, the lymphatic system is kind of broken up into two halves. The first half of the book is going to be talking about that production of lymph fluid, that excess fluid that we saw in the diffusion capillary physiology back in chapter 21, and then all the lymphatics, so the capillaries and the lymph vessels and the trunks and all the lymph nodes and the tissues and stuff like that. But in the second half is dealing with your immune response. So that's where I'm going to spend more of my time making these videos. But I wanted to give some general kind of, this is usually what I would do on the first day, just general terminology, getting that out there. So here's my little whiteboard. I'm writing with my finger on my screen here. So hopefully my writing isn't going to be too horrible. So before we jump into this idea of diseases and how do we fight diseases, there's a couple words I want you guys to be comfortable with. The first one is called the pathogen, and the second one is the antigen. Okay, so the pathogen is a general term used to describe something that can cause disease, right? So pathogens are things that cause disease. This could be a bacteria, a virus, a fungal spore, an amoeba, another kind of protist, whatever. So pathogen is a generalized term to describe things that cause disease. The antigen is more specific. So the antigen is, and we've seen this word before, right? So if you remember in our blood typing, we had A antigens and B antigens and Rh antigens. These are proteins that are embedded on the surface of cells. So these are cell surface proteins. Okay, so they give the identity of something. So like our A, if you had A antigens on your red blood cells, you are type A blood. We have all kinds of antigens on our surface of our cells that say this is us, this is Corey cells, this is who I am. And bacteria and viruses and protists and fungus and worms, they all have their own antigens that give them identification. It is these antigens that are like the name tags that say, hey, leave me alone, I'm good, or hey, I'm foreign, I'm bad, get rid of me. So these antigens are like the name tags that our immune system looks for and responds to when it's doing an attack or a response. So let me draw a couple pathogens. So let's say we might have a bacteria or we might have some kind of virus, right, with its little DNA inside, and this has got its little chromosome DNA inside. So those would be the two pathogens we're going to talk about. Our book focuses primarily on the bacteria and the viruses. We don't get into like parasitic worm infections or fungal infections, but know that your body's going to be very similar in those types of responses. So if we are going to so if those are our antigens, or sorry, our pathogens, the antigens are going to be these surface proteins. So if we're talking about on a bacteria, they might be it could be a receptor or a channel protein or something on the surface of the bacteria that is its name tag. On a virus, it could be these spikes that are coming off the capsid or the envelope, and those would be the antigens for a virus. Okay, so the pathogen is the thing that causes disease. The antigen is the thing that our immune system recognizes. We have self-antigens on our own cells, right? So if I'm going to put a human body cell, which is way bigger than those, then I might have some antigens, and I'm putting in green. Green means good, right? So I'm going to be putting the antigens on my cells, and my immune system, everything we're going to be talking about, will be recognizing those antigens as self and leave it alone. If it recognizes a foreign antigen, either in a bacteria or a virus or somehow displayed on our cells, right? So if we end up displaying one of these guys, then that might be a clue that our cell is infected, and then we can destroy that cell to help protect the rest of our body. All right, so that's just some general terminology when we get into this immune response and kind of disease process. So then this next slide is, I wanted to go over into the types of immunity. So we're going to first start talking about nonspecific defenses, and that's going to be found in this box here. There's lots of different types like fever and inflammation. You'll see that in the next video. So nonspecific or innate immunity, this is something you are born with because you are a human being. It is part of your DNA. It's coded in. You don't have to have exposure to any prior pathogen to be able to get protection from this. So I have a whole little mini lecture on the innate and nonspecific defenses. The blue box, this bigger box over here, this is what we call adaptive or specific immunity. And it's specific because it only works when it's recognizing a particular threat, like this new coronavirus or influenza strains or chickenpox or whatever. It has to have a particular identity for this immune response to take place. And usually you don't have this present at birth. You have to be exposed to this throughout your lifetime, and then your body is adaptive to then recognize it in the future. So that's why it's also called adaptive immunity. All right, so then within this blue box of adaptive immunity, we have two types. We have the active and the passive. The difference between these two is that active immunity is your body is doing the immune response. In passive, somebody else is doing it and you are benefiting from their work. All right, so I'm going to give you some examples as we go through these, because some of them you already know, we just are going to have a new term for that, right? So that's kind of learning. So this first one, naturally acquired active immunity, this is something you probably are all familiar with, is getting sick. So you come across a germ, the germ gets in your body somehow, you know, somebody sneezes on you or something. Gross, I know, but sometimes it happens. So think of naturally acquired active immunity is when you get sick. So you are being presented with this pathogen with its antigens. Your body recognizes it as foreign, produces an immune response. You get your T cells and your B cells producing antibodies. You are producing that immune response, naturally acquired active immunity. The other one is artificially induced active immunity. So in this case, think of this, it's a preventative. So this is like when you get a vaccine. Okay, so a vaccine is we are artificially exposing you to the antigen, not the full pathogen. It's not, don't get the disease from the vaccine. It's just bits and pieces of the antigen to trigger your immune response, and you get it artificially induced in you. It's not sneezing in your face. It's usually an injection in your arm. And so then your body is actively responding to that to prevent you from getting sick if you are exposed to that pathogen in the future. Okay, so getting sick is naturally acquired active. Getting a vaccine is artificially induced active. Both of those, your body is responding to the antigen. In the other box, the passive immunity, it's somebody else's B cells or T cells are doing the fighting, and you benefit from that. The naturally acquired passive immunity, that's for babies, right? If you are in the womb, mom's making the antibodies to all the diseases she's been exposed to in her life. They cross the placenta and it protects the baby in utero. Once the baby's born, they don't have all of these exposures to the germs of their environment yet. But if they're breastfeeding, the mom's antibodies will go through the breast milk and the baby will get that via nursing. So the benefits are made by the mom, conferred onto the baby in utero, as long as they're breastfeeding. Okay, this last group you may not be as familiar with, but it's also passive because it's somebody else making the benefit for you, not you yourself. So this is a good example. I'm going to put the word rabies down here as the example for artificially induced passive immunity. So let's say you get bit by a bat or a raccoon or something that could be a potential rabid animal. Your body will recognize that as foreign and eventually start making antibodies and T cells to try to fight it, but you're probably going to be dead by then, or at least irretrievably infected, and once you show symptoms, you will probably die. So to protect you in the meantime, before your B cells can actually kick into gear and start doing their naturally acquired active immunity, you'll get an injection of somebody else's antibodies, somebody else who was exposed to rabies, or maybe somebody who was vaccinated against rabies. They donate their blood. That blood is pooled, it is stocked. And so when you get exposed to the rabies or potential rabies, you get this immunoglobulin injection. It's somebody else's antibodies protecting you in that window between the exposure event and by the time your body can start making the antibodies that it now recognizes. Because in the meantime, that's the critical time. You do not want to die in the meantime, right? So rabies, think of this as an immunoglobulin shot. You are getting somebody else's antibodies they made, that's why it's passive, artificially injected into you. That's the artificially part. And it's temporary. So both of these passive immunities, it's temporary because you're using somebody else's antibodies. Active is you will always have that with you. All right, so that's my first little intro mini lesson for the lymphatic system. So keep looking or keep checking these little mini videos that are coming out or are posted already. I'm trying to think in the future. So you can keep learning the stuff through chapter 22 on your own. Again, send questions, do emails, and I will see you next time.